The following Appalachian Mountains horror story is real, disturbing, and should be used as a warning. The names and locations have been altered to protect the individuals involved. Viewer discretion is advised. This story is deeply unsettling. A woman nearly dies alone in a Shenandoah hollow. A ranger goes in to save her. And somewhere between the trailhead and the dark at the bottom of that hollow, something goes terrifyingly, irreversibly wrong. Last spring, Ranger Whitaker was eating cold spaghetti over the kitchen sink at the South District Ranger Station when the call came in. Not a dispatch call. A man. It wasn't the kind of afternoon that announces itself. Whitaker had driven the Skyline Drive patrol loop that morning, checked the Loft Mountain campground, written up a permit violation near the Dundo picnic area, and eaten half a granola bar somewhere around milepost 79. The spaghetti was the second half of his day. Cold from last night, eaten standing up over the sink because sitting down felt like a commitment he hadn't agreed to yet. 9 years in the South District had a way of doing that to a person. You stopped fully committing to meals. You stopped fully committing to sitting. He was transferring gear from his patrol truck at the Riprap trailhead, milepost 90 off Skyline Drive, the far southern end of the park, when the man came down the blue-blazed spur trail from the Appalachian Trail. You need to understand something about the South District before this story goes any further. Most people who visit Shenandoah National Park think of it as a scenic drive. 75 miles of Skyline Drive, pull-offs with mountain views, deer grazing at dusk near the campgrounds. That's the park they came to see. The South District is a different place entirely. Down here, the mountain stops being scenic and starts being serious. The Riprap Trail drops 1,500 feet into a hollow. The mountain seems to have folded closed around itself. The canopy in late May is so thick, the hollow runs its own twilight by mid-afternoon. Riprap Creek threads cold and spring-fed between Erwin quartzite boulders, gray and ancient, some of them the size of trucks, stacked by forces that have no human scale. 200 yards off trail in Riprap Hollow, a person is simply gone. Whitaker knew this the way he knew his own truck, not by thinking about it, but by feel. He grew up in Page County, down on the valley floor in the shadow of Massanutten Mountain. He could read the Blue Ridge the way other people read faces. The man coming down the spur trail was mid-30s. Lean the way distance runners go lean. Not gym lean, trail lean. The kind that comes from burning more than you take in for months at a stretch. Hydration vest. Trail shoes caked in fresh Shenandoah mud. He was breathing harder than someone that fit should be breathing at a full stop. That was the first thing Whitaker noticed. The second thing he noticed was the man's eyes. Moving, scanning, not landing anywhere for more than a half second. Not the eyes of someone who had just finished a hard run. The eyes of someone who had decided something and was still deciding whether the decision was right. Young woman. Off the main Riprap Trail, maybe a mile and a half in, face down in the leaves near a stream crossing, blood in her hair, pooled on the ground beside her, not moving when he passed. Whitaker's pen was already out. "You stopped to check on her?" "No." The man said it the way you state a fact about weather. "Something felt wrong. I just kept moving." Whitaker wrote the name the runner gave him without looking up. When he looked up, the man was already crossing the far end of the parking lot, not looking back, moving at the particular unhurried pace of someone who has finished what they came to do. The stain on the back of his hydration vest, near the left shoulder blade, was the wrong color for sweat, the wrong texture for mud. Whitaker's brain filed it the way it filed everything in a fast-moving situation. Noted. Not now, later. and he turned back to his radio. He called Shenandoah Dispatch at the South District frequency, gave the coordinates, requested SMRG backup and a second Ranger unit. The dispatcher told him backup was 35 minutes out minimum. The South District is vast. The staff is thin. That's just how it is down here. The hollow would be fully dark by 8. 45 degrees by 10. A living person was bleeding somewhere in it. He went in alone. 11 minutes down the trail, just before the first crossing over Riprap Creek, he found blood. Bright red, not oxidized, not old. A pool where someone had gone down hard, and a thin smear leading not back toward Skyline Drive but deeper into the hollow, toward Cold Spring Hollow and the boulder fields. She'd gotten up. She'd moved on her own. Which way was she now? Whitaker found her 200 yards off the Riprap Trail. He almost missed her. The mountain laurel in late May grows thick enough in Riprap Hollow that visibility through it tops out at about 15 feet in any direction. A wall of waxy green leaves and pink blooms. Beautiful the way things are beautiful when they don't care whether you live or die. He was pushing through a particularly dense section near the second stream crossing, calling out in the low, even voice he used for lost hikers. National Park Service, search and rescue, call out if you can hear me. When he saw her, she was upright. That was the first thing that didn't fit. The trail runner had described her face down in the leaves, not moving. Whitaker had been mentally preparing for an unconscious patient, possibly unresponsive. Airway management, spinal precautions, the EMT checklist running quiet in the background, the way it always did on a medical call-out. Instead, she was sitting with her back against one of the large Erwin quartzite boulders that define this section of the hollow. Pale gray stone. Massive. The kind of thing the mountain seems to have placed deliberately. Mid-20s. Dark hair matted to her left temple with dried blood, a fresh seep still working through it. She had torn a strip from the bottom of her fleece and was pressing it against the wound with both hands. Steady, methodical. The hands of someone who had assessed the situation and made a decision about it. Her eyes found Whitaker the moment he stepped through the laurel. Not after, the moment. She had been watching the exact spot in the thicket where he emerged before he emerged from it. She found him before he found her. Her lips were moving, not in response to anything. Whitaker hadn't spoken yet. They were moving in a loop, forming the same silent shape again and again, no sound coming out. He stood there and watched 3 full cycles before his brain kicked him forward. He couldn't read lips. The shape didn't look like any word for help he knew. He crouched, dropped his pack, kept both hands visible at chest height, the same deliberate gesture he used approaching any unknown situation in 9 years of backcountry law enforcement. He said his name, said National Park Service Search and Rescue, said he was here to help. The exact words in the exact order that experience had taught him worked, because people in genuine distress hear National Park Service and something in them releases. The specific relief of knowing the system has arrived, that the thing they feared most has been resolved. Lisa's jaw pulled tight. Her eyes dropped from Whitaker's face to the radio on his shoulder, and something behind her expression shifted, fast and total, the way a deer shifts in the half-second before it bolts. Not a flinch, a recalibration. Like she had been running a threat assessment and the radio had just changed the result. A sound climbed out of her throat. Low. Not a word, not a cry. The kind of sound a cornered animal makes when it has decided that the thing in front of it is the thing it has been running from. Whitaker had found scores of lost and injured hikers in Shenandoah's backcountry. Disoriented ones, hypothermic ones, one so dehydrated they couldn't tell him their own names. Not one of them had ever looked at his ranger uniform like it was the source of the danger. He kept moving toward her slowly, voice low, the way you approach something cornered in a space too small for both of you. The mountain laurel pressed close on all sides, pink blooms and waxy leaves, impossibly beautiful, impossibly indifferent to whatever was happening underneath them. Somewhere above, up in the Erwin quartzite boulder field on the ridgeline, a branch snapped. Whitaker didn't look up. He should have. He was maybe 8 feet from her when Lisa's right hand moved behind her back. He saw the shape press against her fleece before he saw the object itself. A specific shape, a specific weight distribution, one that 9 years of law enforcement had written into his nervous system below the level of conscious thought. His hands went up. Trained response. No thought required. She didn't fire, not yet. She held the gun level and waited. The waiting in the green and pink quiet of Riprap Hollow, with Riprap Creek moving cold over the quartzite stones somewhere below them, and the mountain laurel blooming in every direction, like nothing unusual was happening at all. The waiting was somehow worse than the shot would have been. Whitaker looked at her face. Her lips were still moving, still forming that same silent shape, over and over, the same word he couldn't read. What was she waiting for? The round hit him in the left arm below the shoulder. He knew before the echo of the shot finished bouncing off the quartzite boulder field that it had missed the artery. Not because he checked, there was no time to check, but because his legs were already driving him into the laurel thicket, and legs don't do that when the artery goes. The body filed the wound under later with the efficient coldness it reserves for information that will get you killed if you stop to process it now. The cold, hollow air hitting the torn meat of his arm felt like a second injury arriving right behind the first. He didn't slow down. Mountain laurel branches raked across his face. A root caught his right boot, and he stumbled, one hand going down into the cold creekside mud before he got his feet back under him. His left arm was already soaking through his sleeve. He could feel the warmth of it, which was the wrong sensation entirely. Warmth where the cold, hollow air should be. He pushed that information back into the later file and kept moving. He didn't look back. He didn't have to. Behind him, Lisa's footsteps through the hollow weren't what he expected. He had braced for the crashing, panicked pursuit of someone in crisis. The stumbling, the labored breathing, the sounds of someone running on a brain that wasn't fully online. That's not what he heard. Her footsteps were deliberate, evenly spaced. She was moving through Riprap Hollow with the particular unhurried purpose of someone who was not worried about losing him. Like she had been in this hollow before. Like she knew where the terrain funneled, where the creek crossings forced a choice, where the boulder field above Cold Spring Hollow pushed a person into one of 2 corridors and left them nowhere else to go. Whitaker knew this hollow. He had patrolled it for 9 years. The thought that she might know it better than he did arrived cold and quiet, and he pushed that into the later file too, because the later file was getting full, and he needed to find cover before it started spilling. The Riprap Trail passes through a section of Erwin quartzite boulder field, ancient formations stacked and jumbled by geology that has no interest in human timelines, creating shallow overhangs and gaps between stones just large enough for a person to disappear into if they move fast and hurt and know what they're looking for. Whitaker dropped into a depression behind a formation near Cold Spring Hollow, back flat against the quartzite. The stone was cold through his uniform shirt. His left arm was soaking black in the dim hollow light. He applied the tourniquet one-handed. Loop, thread, tighten. His teeth did half the work on the windlass rod because he only had one functioning hand, and there is no training scenario in the NPS EMT curriculum that covers applying your own tourniquet behind a boulder while a woman with a head wound hunts you through a hollow. He pulled the rod until the world went white at the edges. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. His father's trick from a different kind of fieldwork, the kind that had ended on a Virginia roadside when Whitaker was 22. The kind that had left a Virginia State Police uniform folded in a box in his mother's closet in Page County. The kind that Whitaker had spent 12 years trying to decide whether he was honoring or chasing. 4 inches, 4 out. The white at the edges softened. He keyed his radio. Static. The quartzite ridge and the hollow depth were eating his signal the way the South District always ate signal. Completely, without apology. Shenandoah Dispatch might as well have been on the moon. His SMRG backup was somewhere above him on Skyline Drive, 20 minutes out at best, with no way of knowing that the call-out had changed shape entirely since his last transmission. He was alone, bleeding, in a hollow where the mountain laurel and the boulder field together kept visibility under 15 feet in any direction. The analytical part of his brain, the part that had gotten him through EMT certification, through 9 years of backcountry incidents, through the particular loneliness of working a vast district with a thin staff, started building the picture quietly, the way it always did when emotion would get him killed. Hypoxic disorientation, blunt head trauma, a brain that had rewritten its own threat maps, assigned the wrong role to the wrong person, locked its fight response onto a target that didn't deserve it. Lisa wasn't hunting him because she was predatory. She was hunting him because something in the hollow, the cold, the blood loss, the head wound, whatever had happened to her before the trail runner found her, had broken the part of her brain that knew the difference between danger and rescue. She didn't know he was trying to help her. She was going to kill him anyway. His full SAR kit was in the pack he'd dropped when he raised his hands at the boulder. 40 feet back, in the open. The light through the Shenandoah canopy had shifted from the green gold of late afternoon to the flat gray that comes in about an hour before full dark. He ran the options. Stay hidden, wait for SMRG, and likely lose consciousness from blood loss before they reached him. Or get to Lisa before the blood made that decision for him. Neither option was good. One of them was still a choice. Then a footstep landed on the quartzite shelf directly above his position. 1 step, then nothing. The stone transferred the sound the way old dense rock does, perfectly, completely, with no softening. She was right there, 6 inches of quartzite between them, not moving. The sound of her breathing drifted down through the gap in the boulders, wet and ragged from her own head wound, catching on the cold, hollow air. Whitaker stopped breathing, stopped moving, became as still as the stone against his back. Riprap Hollow held them both in its cold, flowering dark. She was right there. Lisa dropped from the boulder shelf. She landed on the creek-level stones in front of Whitaker's position with a sound that was almost casual, the controlled drop of someone who had done it deliberately, not fallen. Gun extended, arm trembling from blood loss or the cold spring air of the hollow or the misfiring inside her skull, or all three at once. Her wound had soaked through the fleece-strip dressing, dark and spreading down the line of her jaw. She was a wreck. She was also the only person in Riprap Hollow with a functional weapon. Both things were true simultaneously, and neither one canceled the other out. Whitaker looked at the gun, then at her face, then, the part of him his SAR coordinator called his weird calm, the part that had arrived the same year he buried his father and never fully left, clicked the noise off. Not the fear, the noise around the fear. He stopped trying to survive the situation and started trying to understand it, the way he approached every scene he'd ever been dispatched to. Find the facts, name them plainly. Don't catastrophize about the parts you can't see yet. He looked at Lisa the way he looked at a trail that didn't match its map. Okay, he said, low, flat, not a surrender, a statement of current conditions. He didn't beg. Begging was noise, and her brain was already full of noise. He could see it cycling behind her eyes, present, then gone, then half back, then gone again, the hollow's particular darkness running its own weather inside her. He talked at the situation, the way a ranger reads an incident report out loud to someone who wasn't there. Inventory, spoken plainly, because naming things makes them smaller, makes them something that can be addressed rather than something that just is. Her core temperature was dropping. He could read it in the way she held her left arm folded tight across her body, the specific self-protective posture of a body trying to conserve heat it was running out of. She believed he was the thing she needed to survive. He could see that clearly. He named it out loud, said, "I know what you think I am. I can see it. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong and expect you to believe me. I'm just going to stay right here." Then he started talking about other things, not tactically, not to find the right combination of words that would unlock something. Just talking, the way you talk to fill a space that would otherwise fill itself with something worse. His niece, 9 years old, goalkeeper for her youth soccer team in Elkton. She dived for every shot regardless of whether she needed to, full extension, laughing when she missed, completely unbothered by the dirt. He had never missed a Saturday. His left arm was currently soaking through its tourniquet in a Shenandoah Hollow, and he was genuinely uncertain whether that was still going to be true this weekend. He didn't say that last part out loud. His father, Virginia State Police uniform, mid-laugh in a faded photo on a truck visor. Route 340, 22 years ago, a traffic stop that didn't end the way traffic stops are supposed to end. What it cost. What working a law enforcement ranger position next to that particular grief had cost in the years since, and what it had given back, and how those two things still didn't fully balance out even after 9 years of trying. The cold spaghetti at the South District sink, the corner booth at the diner in Waynesboro where he ate after every long call-out. Same order, 9 years running, the waitress who never asked any more just brought it. He kept his hands flat on his knees. Didn't move toward her. His voice wasn't calm, it was honest, which is a different thing entirely, and harder for even a damaged brain to process as threat. Calm can be performed. Honest has a texture that performed calm doesn't have. He didn't know if the part of Lisa's brain that read texture was still online. He talked anyway. "I'm not going to grab for it. I'm not going to run. I'm going to sit here until one of us passes out from blood loss. I've got a tourniquet, so my money's on you." Her gun hand dropped 3 degrees. Not surrender. A lull. The storm inside her hitting a gap in the static, a momentary clearing in whatever internal weather, the hollow and the head wound and the cold had been running through her since before the trail runner ever set foot in the parking lot at milepost 90. Her weight shifted to her back foot. The pink mountain laurel blooms pressed in around her shoulders. Her lips were still moving in that same looped shape, that same silent word Whitaker still couldn't read. 3 seconds, maybe 4. He drove his right shoulder into her sternum. His good arm wrapped her gun wrist at the bone as their combined weight went down onto the cold quartzite stones. The gun fired into the canopy. A mountain laurel branch fell. They hit the ground and Whitaker got the wrist pinned under his knee, his body across her chest, before her brain finished processing that the world had moved. Lisa bucked, screamed. The first sound she had made, ragged and animal and unmistakably human at once. the sound of someone who has been terrified for a long time, finally finding a direction to point it. Whitaker held. His left arm was a white wall of pain. Quartzite grit in his teeth. "Stop. I've got you. Stop." She bucked again. Then the fight drained out of her the way cold water finds the lowest crack in old stone. Not unconscious, eyes still open, still cycling. But the fight was gone. He rolled off her and sat beside her in the creekside leaves. Not over her, beside her. Same cold ground, same hollow. He kept his voice exactly where it had been. Low, present, no edges on it. He talked about the mountain laurel blooming along the switchbacks above Chimney Rock in late May, how thick it went up there. His niece diving for corner kicks that were already past her, laughing when she hit the dirt. The drive down Skyline Drive before a long call-out with the windows down. He wasn't looking for the right words. He was being a voice that didn't threaten, in a hollow that had been full of threat, and letting that be enough. The gun was 3 feet away in the creekside gravel. Neither of them looked at it. Then, rough as Riprap Creek gravel, coming from somewhere far behind her own expression, Lisa said one word. Her own name. Not to Whitaker, to herself. Checking that it was still true. Whitaker went completely still. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "That's you." Her eyes found his face. The fog behind them didn't clear. It was structural, not temporary, and his EMT training filled in what his fear couldn't about what that meant and what it would cost her in the weeks ahead. But something behind the fog surfaced. Exhausted. Young. Terrified in the correct direction at last. He stood, held out his right hand, the good one. Lisa looked at it for a long time. Then she took it. They walked out of Riprap Hollow together, her weight partly on his arm, the mountain laurel pressing pink and silent on both sides, the Erwin quartzite boulders, gray and ancient and indifferent above them, Riprap Creek threading cold through the boulder field somewhere below. The Appalachian Trail ahead, Skyline Drive beyond that, the world beyond that. Halfway up the Riprap Trail, Lisa said something else, barely audible, face forward, eyes on the trail, voice coming from somewhere a long way behind her own expression. Whitaker leaned in to catch it. It wasn't her name this time. It was a name he didn't recognize. Spoken the way you speak a name you are afraid of, quietly, and only once, as if saying it any louder might bring it back. It was the same name he would realize later that the trail runner had never given him. His grip on her hand tightened, just slightly. He did not look back into the hollow. 6 weeks later, Ranger Whitaker was eating cold spaghetti over the kitchen sink at the South District Ranger Station. Same posture, same sink, same thin evening light through the window. His left arm was out of the sling now, but he held it slightly away from his body, the way people hold things that have recently hurt them even after they no longer do. Outside, Skyline Drive ran empty in both directions. The mountain doing what the mountain does, which is nothing and everything, depending on how you're looking at it. Dispatch called. Whitaker looked at the radio for a long moment before he answered. Last spring, that pause hadn't existed. Lisa had spent 2 weeks in the neurology unit at UVA Medical Center in Charlottesville. The diagnosis had a clean clinical shape, hypoxic encephalopathy, compounded by blunt head trauma. The brain, starved of oxygen long enough and then struck, rewrites its own threat maps, assigns the wrong roles to the wrong people, and locks those assignments in with the conviction of a system that can no longer question itself. She had no memory of Riprap Hollow, no memory of Whitaker, the gun, the quartzite boulders, or the walk out on the Riprap Trail in the last of the spring light. Not foggy, not fragmented, gone, the way a section of trail disappears under a washout and leaves nothing behind but the absence of what was there. Whitaker found this harder to sit with than he expected. Maybe it was that he remembered all of it. Lisa's family sent a card to the South District Station, plain white envelope, her mother's handwriting inside, "Thank you," and nothing else, because nothing else was adequate. Whitaker pinned it to his truck visor next to his father's photo. Now both were the first things he saw every morning when he pulled the visor down against the Skyline Drive sun. Before discharge, the neurologist had asked Lisa whether she remembered anything from the days before she was found. She said yes. One thing. She was on the trail. The smell of mountain laurel, the sound of Riprap Creek. Then someone ahead of her on the trail. A hydration vest. A lean build. The way the person turned and looked at her, and the expression on their face when they turned. That was the last thing she remembered before the hollow began. When Whitaker heard this from Lisa's family, he said nothing. He thought about the stain on the back of the trail runner's hydration vest. Wrong color for sweat, wrong texture for mud, and how the file he'd opened on it in the parking lot at milepost 90 had never closed. The trail runner was never found. The name he'd given Whitaker came back as no match in any database the Page County Sheriff's Office ran it through. Not a false name exactly, just a name that didn't attach to any documented person who had been in the South District that weekend. A missing persons case filed 3 days before Whitaker's call-out was still open. Subject: male, mid-30s, lean build, last seen wearing a hydration vest. Whitaker had turned it over every way it would turn. The runner had flagged him, brought help directly to Lisa, unless they didn't know she'd survived. Unless they needed a ranger to find her first, so that her one remaining memory would be read as the delusion of a brain-damaged woman rather than an accurate report of the last thing she saw. Unless Whitaker had always just been the mechanism by which the trail runner made himself a witness rather than a suspect. He had no confirmation. He had stopped expecting any. He had told no one about the name Lisa said on the walk out of Riprap Hollow. He checked it quietly against the Page County Missing Persons report. It matched. Some nights he told himself he misheard it, that the hollow distorted sound, that his blood loss was affecting his cognition. Most nights he didn't tell himself that. Shenandoah stretches 75 miles along the Blue Ridge, 196,000 acres the mountain keeps on its own terms. The hollows don't keep secrets, they keep people. Secrets can be found. People, once the hollow takes them, become part of the sound Riprap Creek makes moving through the quartzite in the dark. Lisa went home in June. Whitaker coached his niece's soccer that same Saturday, arm still in the sling, saying nothing about where it had been. She dived for every shot regardless. He didn't miss a Saturday. He still patrols the South District. He never hikes the Riprap Trail alone. The missing persons case is still open. The hollow is still there at milepost 90. Some questions the Shenandoah keeps. It doesn't seem to be in any hurry to let them go. For more Appalachian Mountains horror stories, click here. I'm the Shadow Teller. Stay safe in the dark.